Howdy, everyone, and welcome back to another replay for the finale in the Red Bull Juniors Championship. Just to get the championship standings out of the way at the start, we still have mathematically five drivers in contention for the championship, with myself on in first, dougbarrow in second. There's a 14-point gap between myself and Doug, and then there is a further 18 points back to GT Piggums in third, Superboy in fourth, Hairraiser in fifth, and TDC in sixth. So obviously, because this is the feature race, we will have success ballast applied to the top six in the championship, ranging from 90 to 60 kilos. And without further ado, let us commence the replay for finals day, with Bar on pole position, with Piggums alongside of him. The five red lights come on, and we are underway with a couple of jump starters there on the second and third row of the grid. I think that was Doug and TDC from what I could see, as they race now down into turn one. Bar has a very good start, with Simon now actually taking the position away from Piggums at the start. Simon, one of the drivers without ballast for this race, so he has already made good ground on those around him. One of his best qualifyings of the season, I think, from what I can remember, with Piggums, myself and Doug, the top three in the championship, all running nose to tail through the first sector on this opening lap. Well, actually, there even Razor's involved, so and Superboy. So there are pretty much the top five of the championship running in a one big train coming round on lap one, with Superboy having a look into Degner 1, not really a traditional overtaking opportunity, and he sensibly backs out. As with many of the feature races this season, we have a 30-minute feature race with a mandatory tyre change and probably refueling. It is just using medium compounds, so you will have to pit for just a new compound, rather than having to change onto a different compound. As Doug and myself going side by side, coming towards Spoon Curve, and Doug getting the better traction coming out the hairpin, and that allows Razor to also squeeze past. So Doug trying to close in on that 14-point gap in the championship, but Razor runs off the track onto the AstroTurf. There's absolutely no grip out there, with Superboy spinning in the middle of the pack. Thankfully, ghosts. Otherwise, a few people would have T-boned in there, running a special Ferrari livery for the final race, which does look quite nice. So Bart maintaining his lead on lap one, coming into the final sector. However, Piggums has already managed to overtake Simon again. So somewhere in all of that, Simon has been shuffled down the pack. So Piggums now the one on the attack. Bart coming across the line any minute now to take us over to complete the first lap of the race. Clipping the grass there on the exit, using all the track and a little bit more. Piggums will have the slipstream coming into turn one, but I believe he will just have to sit and wait. As you see there, Simon now coming back at me for P4. However, he's slightly pinched on the inside line. It is actually quite beneficial to use the outside line at the first corner at Suzuka. It does have a little bit of camber as well, so you can use more speed around the outside, as well as it just being a very tricky corner to get right, with a lot of understeer and a bit bumpy as well if you get on the curbs. But the pack seemingly very close together still. We got Tap at the back of the grid, and I believe coming into this race, Tap was running incorrect ballast. As I mentioned earlier at the start, he is not running any ballast because he is not in the top six of the championship. But because he had been practicing with 90 kilos on board, I think he forgot to take it off before the start. As there has been a swap for the lead, I think Bar went wide in the first Degner, and he's dropped to a handful position. He's down to P8, so now championship leaders are fighting side by side on track, and Doug managing again to get the better of me, coming through, accelerating out of the hairpin. So already there's been multiple race leaders, as there has been in every other race, I think, in the Red Bull Junior Series. There's been multiple race leaders in the opening 2 laps of the race. So as they flash past the camera now, coming up to 130R, a long straight here, you would typically think that would be a good place to overtake, but because of the nature of 130R, you can see I think I have just bump draft Doug into this corner. There is no point trying to overtake someone in 130R with cars that are quite aero limited through that corner. They do understeer a lot because of how fast they do take that corner, and it's very risky to try and overtake someone there. So at the moment, nothing doing. Doug maintains his lead and actually builds a little bit of a gap because of that bump draft. And TDC as well, having a bit of a quiet start, but he's actually managed to gain a couple of positions off the line. I believe it was him who jumped the start along with Doug. I can't quite remember, but maybe the jump in the start is a bit of a good omen for this race, considering that the other driver, Doug, who jumped the start, is in the lead of the race, and TDC has made up a couple of positions. So they both seem to be doing all right, not fazed by the penalty that they had to serve after leaving the grid box. But he is under a lot of pressure from Tap coming through the first sector as well, coming through the Dunlop curve, and the same can be said for Doug, as I seem to have a bit more confidence coming through the technical section in the first sector. And there is already a bit of a gap breaking between the top two and those in second and third, as TDC in the background getting it all wrong. I don't know how he's ended up that wide in the corner, but that seems to have gone very wrong for him. And Superboy as well losing the back end, so perhaps drivers have just pushed the tyres a little bit too hard in the opening stages, because they look like they've got no grip at the moment. TDC still drifting the car through the hairpin, and surely Superboy will be all over that, even with the success ballast that Ferrari livery car is running. Cutting back to myself and Doug in the lead of the race. And it looks like it's going to be the same story coming back down to the Casio Triangle in the final chicane. I don't think I'm quite close enough for an attempt there, but Simon is definitely under pressure from Piggins behind. However, there's just not a way through into 130R, as I've mentioned on the last lap. So Simon able to hold on to his position quite well, as myself and Doug side by side. Doug just shutting the door, coming across my nose just to fend off any attack. And he quite skillfully keeps on to that first position, but he has to break the toe coming down the start-finish straight, hugging the pit wall as he rounds the final corner. And it seems to have worked for another lap, so Doug maintaining that lead, and I think I will have to wait up until we get back round to the hairpin after coming under the bridge, because there's just not really an overtaking opportunity throughout this first sector. And you can see there as well how much Piggins has had to drop back. However, Simon having a big connection issue through there. I thought he had just span off the track, but I think he's okay from what it seems. And despite the unnecessary ballast that Steve is running in P5 at the moment is a very good effort after starting toward the back of the grid. I don't think he set a proper quali lap from what I remember. So he had to start all the way down in 11th, and he's made a very good start in the first 3.5 laps of this race. So the only thing that he'll be dreading at the moment is how bad his fuel consumption and tyre wear will be compared to those who are not running the ballast. You see Piggins there having a little look up the inside of Simon. However, he wasn't fully committed to the move, and Simon once again just gets the better traction coming out of there, seeming to able to fend off these attacks from behind. And now Tap is actually the one on the charge. And in the background there you can see Cobra and Razor having a little bit of a battle as well, and Cobra just about getting enough of his car alongside to slip up the inside, as well as Tap overtaking Piggins through the spoon curve. And now Cobra as well is going to make it almost 3 wide between those three. And Cobra just about squeezing through, so Cobra taking as many positions as he liked there. It was just unbelievable how much speed he had coming off of spoon curve. As I think there is another side-by-side battle for the race lead. This time I do not hang it around the outside. I try and go for the switchback to get the better traction. I think it has worked. Doug getting a little bit out of shape coming through there. And it's going to be side-by-side as they cross the line to start lap 5. Does the Alfa Romeo car have enough pace into turn 1? I've just about edged ahead with my nose, but Doug just able to take that inside line, brake a bit later, and once again the positions stay the same. So Tap now the one coming back through into P4. I think Piggins had just gone off the track, and I think we have just lost Piggins from the race, so I think he has disconnected after running wide through turn 1. So I don't know whether that was a wheel issue or something like that, but unfortunately we've had our first retirement of the race. So as to keep you updated with the championship, I believe Doug will be closing in by 3 points, so he'll bring the gap down to 11 points between myself and him in the top 2 positions of the championship. Pigham's now after that disconnect, so I don't think he'll be able to get in for the next race. So his 3rd place in the championship is now severely under threat from those drivers who are still circulating, such as Razor and Superboy. So we'll see what can happen there. I think Razor, I think he's 5th, if I remember the championship standings correctly. I'll get them up now. But yes, Razor is 5th in the championship. So at the moment, he is outscoring both Superboy and Pigham's. So he could be staring at a 3rd place in the championship come the end of the meeting at Suzuka. So he's got a lot to play for at the moment. I don't think he'll take too many risks, though. He's obviously 3 positions ahead of Superboy. 3 or 2 positions ahead of Superboy. So I don't think he'll want to take too many risks. He's already outscoring him by a few points. As you see, again, coming into 130R, the gap between the 2 leaders is quite close. However, this time I'm not able to pull alongside, slightly losing the back end, under braking, locking the rear tyres. And we need the cameraman to kind of keep up with that because we didn't really know what had happened coming on through the exit. And the Alfa Romeo now, again, in the slipstream. This time grabbing the inside line, Doug seemingly not defending it, maybe sensing that it's probably faster to let me go through and we can try and pull away from the group behind. We obviously do need to think about the strategy element, but it's a fairly simple pass going into turn 1 as the lead changes hands once again. So that is a thing you have to consider coming through this race with ballast, is that your fuel consumption will be a lot worse, especially through Suzuka, that's notorious for high-speed sections and traction zones, so pretty much fuel consumption's worst nightmare. I believe there has been a bit of an incident for Cobra. I think there was a slow car coming through the Dunlop curve, and he has lost a couple of positions, so Razor now up into P6, which is important again for that 3rd place in the championship, and he's already attacking Bar for that P5. So this has been a good start from Razor. He's just kept his nose clean. He had a few attempts on the first lap to gain a few cheap positions whilst everyone else was fighting, but he just bided his time. It seems that patience is rewarding those who wait. But you can just see the effect of the ballast through there. Even with a slipstream, he cannot seem to compete with that Jordan livery car that just pulls away without any ballast on board. You see Simon as well. He is slightly under pressure from Tap, who gets a very good exit coming out of Spoon Curve. He's got the inside line for 130R. We'll see if he can make it stick on the inside. There probably will be a bit of wheel banging in, but he doesn't. He actually stay ahead. So he has tucked back in for a Dunlop-Dota slipstream, maybe considering out-braking him. Coming to the outside line, he's almost got fully ahead coming onto the brakes, half on the AstroTurf, but he manages to pick up enough grip. And he moves up into 3rd place, but he is bailing for the pit lane, actually. So he's going for that undercut. We are 12 minutes into the race, so it's not out of the question that he could easily get that 2nd set of mediums to the end of the race. Judging by other cars with ballast who are using a wheel, the tyre wear doesn't seem to be that bad, so he could quite easily get that car to the end. As we see Cobra going wide at turn 1, it does seem to be catching out a few drivers, that tricky curved braking zone for the 1st and 2nd corner, and that puts Packy all over his rear end coming through this 1st sector. And there is also quite a close battle between there. Simon, I don't know if he's made a mistake because he's dropped a bit of time to the 2 behind him, and he is very much under pressure. However, he has been able to soak up the pressure so far this race. I don't think he's lost too many positions. Bar going for a bit of an awkward move up the inside, and it doesn't pay off into the first of the Degner curves. So Simon using that extra pace around the outside just to keep position, but he's got to go defensive again. They bang wheels coming into the braking for the hairpin. Can Bar use the straighter exit from the hairpin just to pull out ahead? And I think he has there. So it's a good move from Bar, having a couple of goes at Simon. And his attempts have been rewarded. He's now up into 3rd place, with Razor now also looking to maybe snatch that position. Simon and Razor, probably 2 drivers with very different driving styles. One likes to lift and coast into corners to save a bit of fuel, and the other has probably the latest braking manoeuvres I've seen out of any driver on Gran Turismo. So I will probably be expecting a battle between these two. And Cobra as well, despite his off at turn 1, has had a very good lap here. He's already broken away from Pappy again, and he's closed back in, and he's in touching distance of P3 here. As you can see there, Razor having a bit of a sniff up the inside, and Cobra as well trying to go round the outside at that chicane. So this little group of cars is no way set in stone for position. And all of this fighting as well, I've just noticed in the background, Superboy will be loving this. He will want this battle to carry on between these drivers, because this is a podium position that he can smell in the distance, and he can probably see that Razor, his closest championship rival, is not too far away. So despite the spin, he has seemingly got good pace in that car still. As we ride on board with Cobra in P6, and you can almost feel the understeer coming through this first sector. Having cars with so much downforce, you do just tend to get a lot of wash from the aero of that car ahead, and it does make it very difficult to conserve the tyres and just get overall good lap time. And Razor just having a small snap of oversteer there, a bit eager to try and get past Simon. You can see that Bar is getting away up the road, and Razor going for a surprise overtake down the inside. Very nicely done. There is a little bit of contact, Simon probably not seeing that one coming, but he has made a very good overtake there and has compromised Simon. He does hold up Cobra a little bit. You can see in the mirrors as well, Pappy all waiting in the wings just to see if there's a gap here for this battle. I think Cobra might end up having a sniff down the inside. He gets a little bit of a bumper up the inside. Simon very generous with the space there. I don't think Cobra was probably alongside, but he left him space to come through, just not wanting to get involved in any accidents at the moment. However, the two behind Cobra now will have a very hefty slipstream coming down to 130R. Simon pulling to the inside. Can they keep it side by side through 130R? Yes, they do, almost. And Simon just about fending off Pappy. He doesn't lose out too much, despite having to lift through 130R. And the positions stay the same as they were exiting the spoon curve. So, and we see Bar as well bailing for the pit lane. Same with Cobra. So this will be for, as I mentioned earlier, this is for another set of medium tyres. You have to change to a new set of tyres, despite not using alternate compounds. It is mandatory that you have to use two different tyres, or sets of tyres in this race. So those two will be coming out on their fresh mediums, trying to get an undercut on the drivers around them, which isn't a bad strategy considering that the battle between third down to seventh seems to be really close once everyone has filtered through their pit stops. And those two filter out in 7th and 9th, I believe that will be. Going back out onto the track. Well, I believe that's TDC coming into the Casio Triangle. So he's unfortunately just not had the race that he wanted after such a good start. It's just not paid off for him, unfortunately. But as we know, there is reverse grid for the sprint race, so his weekend is not done. He could still get some very decent points, and he is P6 in the championship, but he could progress higher if he has a very good sprint race. There are equal points on offer for feature and sprint races, so it is 20 points for a win in the main race, which is this one. So there is also 20 points on offer for a sprint race win. So unless if something catastrophically wrong goes for another driver, I think TDC will be on pole for the sprint race. So every cloud, and he's just got to take the positives out of this one, and he's still scoring points as well, which is the important thing. So cutting back to the battle between myself and Doug, there's not really been much going on at the moment. We have sort of reached a stalemate. The gap just hovering around about a second to 7/10. But Doug there picking up a track limits penalty for the final chicane. I think he did just use a bit too much curb, and unfortunately the game not liking that. So Doug will have to serve the track limits penalty, but he won't be under pressure from any cars behind, as we see Razor making his pit stop as well. So he is reacting to those behind him who have pitted during this race. We are getting towards the end of the fuel tanks for those cars who are running the ballast. So there's not much more racing that these drivers can do before they have to pit. So Razor there just topping up with fuel as he exits his pit box, back out onto the track, and in P7. So he has been jumped by Tap, but this is important. Where does he come out in relation to Cobra? Cobra does take that position ahead of him. So Razor and Cobra's gone wide again through turn 1. So even though he had that position, even on the warmer tyres, he's ran wide through the first corner and he's given up that position instantly. And he's off again into the gravel. So the dirty tyres just not helping him at all through the first sector. And this is giving a Razor a massive break. He can now focus purely on just getting those tyres up to temperature and getting up down the road, putting in some consistent lap times. So yeah, unfortunately for Cobra, not what he wanted to see. But unfortunately for Razor as well, he has come out a long way behind Bar, who maybe, because of the fact that he's not running ballast, he's put less fuel in the car. He's been able to save more on that first stint, and that's why he's come out so far ahead compared to the others. So I think if my maths is correct, Bar is the leading driver of those who have done their pit stops so far. So he's looking very good for a podium finish in the final feature race of the season. However, it's definitely not over, as Tap is probably not going to give it up without a fight, despite the ballast on board. He has shown good pace around this track so far. As Pappy and Simon, I think there was a bit of contact. I just caught that before I was going to cut to myself in the pit lane. Simon also bails for the pit lane. And you can just see there, Simon on 29% fuel, myself on 13%. So that just shows you how much an extra 90 kilos is going to just add to your fuel consumption. I come out of the pits with a clear track around me, so this is playing off into my strategy, as Doug now is going to try and push whilst he's got clean air in front of him to have a very mighty in-lap before he pits, presumably at the end of this lap. I don't think he can get much more time out of that fuel if both of our fuel consumption was pretty similar. So Bar at the moment running in a net P3, I believe. I do believe Doug will slot in between myself and Bar. But a net P3 is very good. Simon has come out just ahead of Razor, so he has managed to maintain that position. Running as well with, having to put less fuel in the car. He has managed to gain a lot of time through the pit stop cycle. And even there as well, Razor suffering with this dirty air coming through, I think it's turn 5. If I'm counting properly. And he just went a little bit wide, so that has compromised him. So Simon's still trying to get those tyres up to temperature. Maybe Razor just not anticipating how slow these Red Bull Junior cars are on the cold tyres. They really don't like it because of the amount of... They rely more on their aerodynamic grip than mechanical grip, and they don't seem to warm up very quickly. And Superboy has put in some very good lap times in the past couple of minutes, because he is now looking like he could challenge for a net P4 if things stay as they are. I do believe Pappy will be going long on his stint, so we'll have to wait for a bit of time just to see where he filters out. And as I mentioned earlier on, Doug has come into the pits to react to the undercut that I have pulled off. So we'll see where he comes out. I presume it will be behind, considering that he had to serve that track limits penalty the last time we checked in on that battle. So, and unfortunately we do have Cobra and TDC running around at the rear of the field after both having a couple of incidents this race. But they will be, as I mentioned earlier, on the front row for the sprint race. So they've still got a good chance for some points. Pappy inherits the lead with myself in second, Doug coming out in third place. And he is definitely not troubled from the cars behind, so that is probably good for Doug. He can now focus on just getting up after me and putting in those faster lap times. He'll probably want to outscore me, because even if it stays as it is, if I win the race and Doug finishes second, the championship will still be on for Doug. He can still outscore me in the final race and take the title, but he won't want the gap to increase because it just puts more unnecessary pressure on him. So he'll be wanting to win the race, try and close that gap down by 3 points once Pappy comes into the pits, and obviously we are now back in first and second. And for context on the podium position as well in the championship, So we've obviously got Razor, who is now back into his P7. I think it will be P6 once Pappy pits. But he's got his closest rival right behind him. So I think Razor will undoubtedly move up into P4 in the championship because of Piggins' disconnect earlier on. The gap between 3rd and 5th in the championship is only 4 points. So Superboy and Razor will both move up a position. Let me just pan to their battle. They will both move up positions, and Razor will gain a couple of points. I believe if it stays as it is, Razor will be 1 point behind Superboy coming into the final race. So if Razor can actually overtake Simon anytime soon, that'll actually put enough points between the pair of them that Razor will be ahead of Superboy by 1 point. So this is a very important overtake coming up as he goes for the inside, coming into 130R. They give each other loads of room. Simon somehow doesn't run off the track there, despite all the understeer. And Troy trying to make it 3 wide. He breaks on the grass. There's a bit of contact between all 3 of them, and Superboy has spun out again, getting way too excited, seeing the opportunity present itself into Casio Triangle. There's just not enough space for 3 cars there, and unfortunately he clips the grass under braking and locked the rear tyres. And he's got a lot of work to do there. But despite all of the calamities, Razor does achieve what he wanted. He did get past Simon and all of that. So he has moved up into P6 now, outscoring Superboy by 2 points, a net 2 points now. So he will be ahead of Superboy by 1 point, I believe, if Pappy pits anytime soon. He is relishing in the lead now, whilst everyone else has pitted. And amongst all of that chaos, Tap has now moved ahead of Bar. I did say he wasn't going to give it up easily, and he's moved up ahead of Bar into a net P3. So from 11th on the grid, he has made a very good recovery drive, as he has done in the previous couple of meetings. So perhaps for the next season, as long as Tap can get his quali pace sorted out, he seems to have very good racecraft. So for the next season, if he can just sort out his quali pace and put in a really good lap time within the 2-lap hard lap requirement, then he'll be in very good position, I believe, for the next main and mini seasons. And I'm just noticing in the distance as well, myself and Doug are catching up to Pappy. I don't believe, well, Pappy, even despite him going a bit deep there, he will not end up in a battle between myself and Doug. He is going to box this lap to, all he really needs to do is just put the fuel in, but he obviously does have to change his tyres. So Pappy running the fuel right down 3% there. So with only a couple of laps left in the race, we've got 3 minutes on the clock, so probably two laps of racing left for the majority of drivers in the field. It relinquishes myself and Doug back into 1st and 2nd for this race. And the battle for P3 is definitely not over. Bar not letting Tap get away at all. Tap getting onto the AstroTurf there. I did just catch that in the corner of my eye. And he's given up that 3rd place. So Bar now with the track position and with a couple of seconds gap as well. So I think in the final stage of this race, that's going to be very difficult for Tap to make that time up again. I think he did just break on the AstroTurf, just slightly, ever so slightly there. But Pappy, running long on that first stint, has come out in P5. He has jumped so many people in that pit stop cycle. And with only 2 laps to run on this medium combat tyre, he'll be very quick at the end of this race with only 2 laps of fuel on board. But he's just clipped the grass there, cost himself a bit of time. But it might not matter. If he can put in a lap time that's about 2 seconds quicker than Steve up ahead, he might still catch him by the end of this race. Simon's still putting up a valiant defence against the 2 behind him. And you can see Superboy already back on the tail of Razor. So Simon has managed to get back past Razor. So whether that was a mistake or not, or a track limit penalty for Razor, I'm not quite sure, because he did have a couple of seconds gap between these 2. So this is not set in stone again. It could still end up that Superboy ends up outscoring Razor, despite the crazy race that he's had so far, as I think that is me on the track map crossing line to start the final lap. So this is definitely just one more lap of racing after this. Superboy tucked into the slipstream of Razor, who is tucked into the slipstream of Simon, coming through 130R. Simon's slightly missing the apex, which is going to compromise his line. Can Razor go for a move? He's going to have to go for the outside. Simon covering the middle of the road. And it just stays as it is coming through there. Razor potentially setting himself up for a final lap overtake here, so that Simon doesn't get much chance to respond once he gets alongside. Going to ride on board with Superboy coming down towards turn 1 here. And I think every other battle on track is sorted, because Tap, unfortunately, on those dirty medium tyres, just hasn't been able to close back into bar. So this is the closest battle on track at the moment. And you just see there Razor using all the curves, flicking up the grass there. Simon actually getting out of shape, and Razor sticking a nose at the inside, but there's just not enough space through here. And that actually gives Troy more of an advantage now, coming through the Dunlop curve for the final time. The final lap board just comes up on screen there, confirming that it is the last lap of racing. And Razor going defensive into the first Degner curve, probably a bit unnecessary, seeing that Troy was probably not really going to go for that. He wasn't close enough. And that has compromised his line coming into the hairpin, which definitely is an overtaking opportunity. Can Superboy outbrake the latest of the breakers in the form of Razor? He's looking for what looks to see a bit of a better traction, but the understeer from the older tyres just not giving him the grip he wants. And I think Simon now might just have this in the bag. He's managed to get enough of a gap that he can bring this one home comfortably. As we cut now back to myself in the lead of the race. I think this is only my second win in the season, clipping the grass, coming around the final corner. But it is P1 for the second time in the season. Doug taking another podium in the season to keep the championship hopes alive for the final race, with Barr taking a very good podium, one of his best results in the season, I think it is, with Tap coming across the line in P4. Pappy in P5, Simon hanging on to that P6, Razor just about fending off Troy in the slipstream. So Simon comes across the line, P6 in this race, a very good race from him. Razor in 7th, Superboy in 8th, and as we await Cobra and TDC to come across the line to consolidate the results, Cobra in 9th and TDC in P10, who will be on pole position for the sprint race, which I will get the replay up for right now. As we resume the replay for the sprint race, as previously mentioned, TDC on pole position with Cobra alongside both myself and Doug, the top two in the championship, on the back row of the grid, as we are away for the final race in the Red Bull Junior Series, with Superboy getting a very good start from 3rd place on the grid. He's already ahead of Cobra, but he doesn't have enough of a gap to challenge for the lead coming into turn 1. And there is contact between myself and Doug, I think that was, coming through turn 1, whether that was just Doug losing it on the cold tyres or contact between him and another driver. I think he was on the outside of Barr and he's just braked on the AstroTurf, similar to what we saw Cobra and Piggins do in the last race. So already Doug's championship hopes have taken a huge blow at the first corner. So he has got a lot of time to make up as the rest of the drivers file through the two Degner curves, with Cobra managing to take back the 2nd place that he lost at turn 1 from Superboy. So we've got a close battle between the drivers who in contention for 3rd place in the championship, as Cobra going a bit deep into the corner, Superboy having a look up the inside, and he gets the better traction on the exit, but he hasn't got the inside line for the curve on the straight, and the shorter line for Cobra just keeps him ahead whilst TDC is trying to get up the road. I think TDC is still mathematically in contention for third place in the championship. But he is running in P6, I believe, at the moment in the championship. So it's still all to play for him. As Superboy, once again, he is all over Cobra like a rash as they come into 130R. We've got a battle between Tap and Simon coming through the 130R corner, and he gets up the inside to move up into P5. I believe he has now taken the ballast, well, some of that ballast off of his car. I think he does have still to run some, considering that he finished within the top 6 in the last race. So at the moment, both the top 2 in the championship are still running in the bottom 2 positions in this race. So it has been a steady start. Both of us, after Doug's turn 1 shenanigans, both of us just wanting to keep it clean and not do anything silly. And Tap with a very aggressive move into turn 1, just about giving Razor enough space on the outside, and he moves up into P4. He's gone a bit wide on the grass, and Razor gives it straight back to him, coming around the outside of turn 3. So it's chopping and changing all the time now, with Cobra now back into that third place, with Superboy up into second, and he's already hassling TDC for the lead of the race. So typical Red Bull Junior stuff here, as Bar gets onto the gravel, coming around the Dunlop curve. Surely Pappy will have the move coming to the outside of the Degner 1, but it is not Pappy, as I take both positions on the outside. So Pappy seemingly getting a bit wide as well, not having the exit he wants, and I have chosen my moment to put a couple of cars between myself and Doug, coming through the second lap now with a bit of oversteer as well. So you can see still running the full 90 kilos on my car, and it's just making the back end of the car a bit tail happy there. So that's not going to do my rear tyres any favours at all, as TDC under severe pressure now from Superboy coming through the spoon curve. Obviously Superboy running the 66 kilos. Actually no, he wasn't. He was running the 72 kilos of success ballast in the first race. So now he is like a lion out of the cage without any of that success ballast, finishing in P8 from that last race. So he is now feeling very speedy, and he's gone a bit deep into 130R. TDC trying to go round the outside, braking on the grass, and he still somehow gets that stopped. So it's just pass and repass in the first 2 laps of this race. Troy already back up the inside for another go, coming down to turn 1. TDC clipping the grass, coming round there. But he has got the better exit, so we'll see who can actually brake later. Again, it does seem to be TDC who does have a bit more confidence on the brakes. But scratch what I just said, because Superboy down the inside to take P1. And I believe he can now settle in there, as TDC going onto the grass. Does seem to be a few troubles for the drivers, as the track is incredibly overcast out there, and TDC going through the gravel with a slight tap from the rear from Tap, and he just waits for everyone to filter through before he rejoins the track. I believe he would have been ghosted at that point, but still very sportsmanlike to just let everyone get through and so that no one is affected. So Pappy and Bar still negotiating this P7 now that TDC has fallen to the back of the pack. And again, they are very close coming into the Degner curves, but I don't think there's really an overtaking opportunity coming about for Bar in that section. Simon is now the next target for myself, coming towards the hairpin on this lap. I feint to the inside, but there's Simon just late enough on the brakes to keep me behind. And as I said earlier, there's not really any reason to go for a half-hearted move into any of these corners. You don't want to take yourself out of contention so early on in the race. You've still got to make the last 15 minutes here. And you can just see the pace that Doug has. There might have been a bit of contact there, and there is, yes, Doug giving up the position. So Doug was up the inside, but there was a bit of wheel banging coming through the spoon curve, and he gives the position back to Bar. But the fact that he was already on the tail of Bar means that he could easily still beat me this race. He has not given up on this championship without a fight. And he's still got very good pace as we come towards the end of lap 3. So quite long laps here at Suzuka because of the pace of these Red Bull cars. It does mean it is about a 2-minute lap time. So we're not going to get many laps done. We're only going to get about 10 or 11 laps in that 20-minute time frame. as Simon is now running behind me. So somewhere in all of that, I have now passed Simon. I can't remember if I caught that on camera or not, but I have now moved up into P5. However, there is a bit of a gap between myself and Razor, who are both running Success Ballast, I believe. I think Razor got P6 in that last race. But Razor looking very handy here to maintain that third place in the championship. So that, which is a very good accolade to have, considering that he's not a fan of the Success Ballast, considering that he often has to run it because of his position in the championship. So he's still doing a very good job at the moment. So just keep him in touch, even for a second place finish, to round off the season with a very good result on the podium. And he's even on for a fastest lap as well. So if he can just gain these two positions ahead of Tap and Cobra, I believe he might still just be ahead of Superboy in terms of points. But they could be level on points. I think Razor is potentially 2 points ahead of Superboy. So actually I think my maths is a bit incorrect there, because I think Superboy would actually be the one who would be 1 point ahead if Razor was to get into second and Superboy still won the race. So these are crucial laps for Razor to get ahead of the two drivers ahead of him. You see there, Cobra looking for a move on the outside of Steve, and he's actually got the overlap quite easily. 8 tenths up on the fastest lap, so Razor is pushing for these two positions. Tap and a fellow driver who is running the Success Ballast, and both of them just braking a little bit early, both a bit cautious as to not push the other driver off the track as they go side by side through the final chicane. And Tap already breaking the slipstream so early on down the straight. Razor opting to get the slipstream of the Red Bull car, well, the Red Bull liveried car, coming into turn one, but Tap does send it back down the inside. There is a bit of contact as Tap just edges ahead there, and Razor unfortunately not able to get fully alongside Cobra, so it is still Tap P3, Cobra P4, and Razor in, Tap and P2 I should say, Cobra P3 and Razor P4. And you can just see how much more confidence Razor at the moment has through this sector. He has finally adjusted himself to the new ballast that he's running on that car. But at the moment, Superboy doing everything he needs to do to get that third place in the championship. Cobra running very wide through the second Degner, and he's in the wall, just accelerating on the AstroTurf. And he's got damage as well, which is heavy damage in the Red Bull Junior Series. So unfortunately, he will have to pit to get that fixed. And what was looking like a podium finish on the cards for Cobra has unfortunately gotten away from him. The two drivers who just didn't have the luck in the first race, running 9th and 10th again, this track just not favouring them at all. So unfortunately, Cobra back down into P10. Which promotes Razor now into third place. That is one of the positions that he needs to keep his hopes of a third place in the championship alive. However, I have just noticed that I am also bearing down on these two in the background. However, one slight bit of comfort that can come to the two ahead is that there is not much urgency for myself to overtake these two. I'm already maintaining that points gap in the championship lead. So I think Razor won't really have much to worry about from my end. As we see now, Pappy going around the outside of Bar in the final chicane to get up into P6. So that battle between these two still carrying on, with Doug not far behind at all. So Doug looking to probably still get a P5 finish in this race, despite the spin at turn one. And as I mentioned, Cobra now pitting to fix that damage. But Cobra could still go for a fastest lap attempt here, so he still could pick up an extra point and a nice accolade of the fastest lap to give to him at the end of the season. So as they wind their way through the first sector, there is actually I think Razor has closed in quite a bit here on Tap for P2 in the race. So Razor is doing everything he can to keep one hand on that third place trophy. Does he go for a surprise move like he did on Simon in race one? I don't think he can. He's looking for the better traction on the exit. He doesn't quite get it as there's a bit of instability from the rear of that car. And I think Tap there will be breathing a little bit easier as they come into Spoon Curve, because they're just not really a traditional overtaking opportunity. It is a bit of a slower corner, but the braking zone is quite short because you progressively slow down for the tighter second apex. And as we cut back now to this battle, we see Doug re-attempting his overtake up the inside of Bar into Spoon Curve, and this time he has got it done cleanly. So Doug up into second place there, despite running 84 kilos of ballast. And I think Bar will be running the 78 from his podium in the last race. So this is quite an even fight between these two drivers. Still gaining on Pappy though, coming into 130R. Can Doug make it 2 cars within half a lap that he's overtaken? He goes to the outside line, but he just looks for the switchback on Pappy, going for those late apexes. It might work, you know, as he's trying to pull alongside, coming onto the start-finish straight, tucking back in for a bit more slipstream, as I don't think Pappy is running as much success ballast as Doug. So Pappy will naturally have a bit more straight line speed, but Doug now up the inside, and it is 2 cars in basically half a lap for Doug, as Bar as well, seeing the door wide open that Doug has created, and he slips back through now into P7. So Pappy losing out 2 positions there. He will be wanting to get back ahead of these two. He has shown good pace actually from what we saw in his stint at the end of the feature race, with Bar going a little bit wide through the sector, but actually Pappy going into the gravel and losing the rear end, applying the throttle. He has hit the wall, but thankfully no damage for him, and that has unfortunately ended his chances of a P5 finish. It could have been, because Simon is not actually that far up the road from these drivers, as Razor now is in second place. He has managed to get ahead of Tap coming on that previous lap. So with 6.5 minutes left on the clock, near enough, Razor now, he's going to have to try and set his sights after Troy if he wants to keep that 3rd place in the championship. It's been a very good race from him so far. He's been doing everything he needs to so far, but he's got to have the last 4 laps of his life basically to close in on Superboy, because all of this fighting has just allowed Superboy just to break away from the rest of the pack. So as we see there as well, I think Doug is on the back of Simon, so it is going to be another overtake in the space of a lap for Doug. He's already ahead going into 130R. Simon not seeming to fight that one, not interested in running wide again through the 130R corner. So Doug up into P5. It's been a good recovery so far in this race, but unfortunately I don't think it's enough at the moment, as we see Bar getting all out of shape coming through the chicane. The camera cuts back to him, but somehow still on the track. I don't know how he managed to keep it on there despite accelerating on the grass. But as I was mentioning, unfortunately Doug, at the moment, he's going to need a Herculean effort to win the championship at the moment. However, we've seen stranger things happen in motorsport, and there is still the threat of a disconnect at this point in the race, because we have seen other drivers disconnect from the race. So there is still that threat that I could disconnect at any point and score no points, and Doug score just about enough. I think he needs around about 17, 18 points. And they see there an opportunistic move from Tap up the inside. Razor seemingly showing him that he is not impressed with that move, or he had just lost the back end, either or. It was a bit opportunistic from Tap, if I'm going to be honest, trying to dive bomb into the second Degner, and it might have just unsettled Razor's back end. So I think they will be fine with each other now though, as neither of them getting any damage from that collision. But the more that these two battle, the more it is going to bring myself and Doug into contention, because what Doug will be hoping for now is for these two to wipe each other out and possibly collect me as well, so that there's a bit of a pile-up and he could sail on through into second place. I mean, what you really ideally want is for everyone in front of him to retire from the race. But it does seem a bit unlikely, but he's got to hang on to every hope that he can, because that's just how you got to operate when you're in a championship battle. You've got to look at the bright side and just think that you can't give up before it's over. And Tap there, just using a lot more curb than Razor coming through the Casio triangle. That will give him a very good run onto the start-finish straight. I think we will only have 2 more laps left in this race. So it is urgent times now for Tap to get this move done. He's already tried it at Degner 2, which didn't pay off. Sometimes those opportunistic moves do work because they are unconventional, and the guy in front just doesn't really expect an overtake to be thrown there. As they file their way through the first sector, these drivers still setting personal best lap times, so they are still pushing extremely hard despite being on the older tyres. The fuel consumption obviously helping with that, making the cars lighter towards the end. So they are still getting faster and faster out there, so it does show you how hard these drivers are pushing. As Razor gets all out of shape coming out of Degner 2, so once again there is a bit of drama between the 2 drivers, and Razor seemingly not fighting it. He lets Tap go, presumably thinking he might have impeded him, losing the back end there. So Tap just goes through on the inside of the hairpin, back into second place. So Razor now looking for that slipstream, coming into Spoon Curve. Nothing doing as of yet. However, as I mentioned the last lap, all of this battling is just bringing me closer and closer to snatching a position on the final lap of the race. We're going to ride on board from the rear of Tap, and you can just see the pace that Razor's got in the slipstream. I don't know if Tap had to miss a gear there or something. The straight line speed demonstrated by Razor coming through there was unbelievable. As Tap pulling to the outside now to have a go. So these two providing some of the best action in the Red Bull Junior Series for this meeting, as it is just an intensely close battle so far in the race. Picking up that slipstream, coming into turn 1 for the final lap of the race. And he pulls out quite late. Can he get later on the brakes? Yes, he can. Does he run wide? He's managed to feather the brakes well enough that he's got enough rotation, and he's back up into P2. So I think now, I don't think there's enough time for me to catch up despite all the battling. So Razor now, he must focus on trying to get back that position. He needs to do everything he can to maintain any chance of a P3 in the Drivers' Championship. So as we round into Degner 2 now, Superboy driving a pretty much faultless race up front. He is I'm pretty sure he's just going to come home to take the victory. And Tap going for a fastest lap as well on this at the end of the race. So he is going for, I will also mention briefly as well that Tap is going for the Reserve Championship as well, because he is the highest placed reserve driver in the standings. So that will be a nice accolade for him to get. If he can, well, I'm pretty sure if he just finishes the race at this point, I think he will be the highest placed reserve driver. So, but he's gone a bit wide, and Razor goes back down the inside. So Razor back into second place there, but I think it's a little bit too late for anything to challenge Superboy. Superboy coming through 130R now. The final lap board comes up on screen to show that it is last lap of racing, no more after this. So as we cut back to Superboy, we've barely seen him all race because he's just been running away from the rest of the field as he comes across the line to take the final race victory of the season in his brand new Ferrari livery. Razor, a very good second place, but unfortunately a bit of heartache as he misses out on third place in the championship. Tap in third, and myself coming across the line in P4 to take the Red Bull Juniors Championship. Doug putting up a very good effort in the final race despite spinning out at turn 1. He claims the runners-up position in the championship, P5 on the track. Bar coming across the line in P6, Simon in P7, and TDC actually getting promoted back into P8 despite having that big off at Degner 2 earlier in the race. So a good recovery from him despite having front end damage. I didn't quite see what happened to Pappy there, why he's fallen down to 9th. But Pappy will come across the line in P9 and Cobra in P10. And with that, I would like to thank you all for watching the Red Bull Junior Series. So I will catch you in the next one.